thought you captured how farcical it was so well in that documentary, and it really is a story that needs to be told. Growing up in Galway, we were in one or two channel, and we used to be jealous of the people who had BBC and ITV because we only had RTE. And I remember the shock as a young man, the first time I actually heard Gerry Adams speak. Is that what he actually sounds like on the TV in my parents' house?
Get the actor back.
Yeah. So my question would be, in your researching, did you ever come across regret from the British authorities that maybe this was bad and that could have backfired? And secondly, as you have mentioned and others, it really resonates with what's going on today. And I think the last 11 months in Palestine have made a lot of us really despair. And others have mentioned Al Jazeera's office in Ramallah being shut down last week. And my friend here beside me reminded me that 150 odd journalists have been murdered in Gaza, which shows how much journalism is seen as a threat when it is done properly. So yeah, I suppose my question is about self-censorship, but also in Britain. The 2 people in the last 6 weeks have been stopped either at an airport in their home, raided, their phones, equipment taken off them, Sarah Wilkinson and I think it's Richard Medhurst. So this has not just happened in Israel. And on RTE last week, I heard a BBC senior correspondent being the only person on our morning RTE1 show, Claire Byrne's show, talking about what was happening in Israel and Palestine 2 days after I saw the same guy write on the BBC website that the incident with the pagers was a spectacular coup, which, like, this is we're watching the Palestinians being dehumanized now, just as Danny and the people in West Belfast were in the 70s and 80s.
Thank you very much.
Roisin, I'd like to congratulate Roisin on the film. You said you started with the workshop declaration with Derry Film and Video. Just as a point of information about the workshop declaration, it was an ACTT union agreement originally. Channel 4 was able to fund people through it. They're still able to fund people through it, but they don't. Also, you said you were interested in Derry Film and Video and the other workshops. Please go ahead and make a film about the workshops and the workshop declaration. It would be fascinating. They all hold their own copyright. The problem with, you said about May and acceptable levels was they don't exist anymore. But all the ones that still exist hold their own copyright, and they had to be workers' co-ops. It was quite a socialist agreement, really.
No, the socialist agreement is the problem in this case. They all have copyright.
I'd just like to say that, I mean, as a filmmaker, in the early 90s, the fact that the broadcasting ban was in effect meant that you didn't want to create a lot of hassle for yourself by going and interviewing people in Sinn Féin, and you try and get somebody else who maybe wasn't such a good spokesperson but wasn't going to be banned to appear in documentaries. Sometimes actually that helps in that you help to lift somebody up who maybe got more involved than they would have done. But certainly the effect that you said, somebody said earlier, that there were a lot less interviews with people from Sinn Féin because of the hassle of doing it is definitely true. And the other thing is that on the loyalist side, Ian Paisley made a career out of apologising for loyalist paramilitaries and sort of supporting them 1 minute and not the next, and never got banned. And in fact, there was a myth around, wasn't there, that Ian Paisley said it wasn't fair that Sinn Féin got all the best voices. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. We've got a question at the back and then a final question from here in the front row.
Will I go ahead? Congratulations, Roisin, on a very compelling film. I was one of the actors who did the voiceovers in the South, and it was totally ludicrous. But there was an expression at the time, it's a very nice earner. And my question is, to what extent should any government be allowed to restrict? If they feel that the state is under threat, as obviously the 26 counties felt, they weren't recognised by Sinn Féin at the time. So they felt there was a real threat to the state being overthrown. Does the state have any right in that situation to restrict or censor, you know? That's the question, you know.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'm wondering, what do the governments expect the effect of the Section 31 and the broadcasting ban to be? That is, I'd always assumed that the actors was just a loophole that the broadcasters exploited, that they had expected Sinn Féin to be excluded from the airwaves altogether. Is that your understanding? And also a quick question to Danny Morrison. Do you have any regrets about the phrase most associated with you, an arm light in one hand and a ballot box in the other? Or are you happy with that? It seems to be the thing you're most famous for.
Let's come back, pick up on the question. First of all, the two questions for you, Roisin. Regret, any sign of regret amongst the British government, and on the gentleman's question as well?
Yeah, so to your question about kind of what we're seeing, so firstly, regret among people who were involved at the time. So famously, Douglas Hurd himself actually did not think that the broadcasting ban was a good idea. It really was Thatcher's ban. Hurd, like, famously kind of didn't think it was a good way of going about things, and she kind of overpowered him and went over his head essentially around it. Now, a lot of these figures were very old and are or deceased. But no, there was like a lot of, I wouldn't say regret. I think there was just like, in the same way that even, you know, John Major towards the end says, you know, that even the unionist groups thought it was a joke. Everyone thought it had backfired, it had been poorly thought out, and it had ended up sort of becoming a symbol of how Thatcher was on her way out, essentially, that she had lost the plot, that she had lost this kind of Midas touch, that everything would kind of work for her, and at this point it wasn't. This was kind of one of the sort of earliest sort of instances where she was not able to govern and keep a hold of her own party in the same way. So definitely there was regret among the Tories and among anyone we spoke to in both the media and in politics, for definitely. Then about, I think you were asking me about sort of censorship and that. I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think making this film, you know, over the last year, it was stunning to see how, you know, language or even the formulation of certain questions, you know, how they can basically either they can silence someone, they can they have an erasing quality to them, you know, the classic sort of, but do you condemn the October 7th? Let's not even go there, but you know, that kind of formulation of questions and the use of language. And as I was saying, you know, Novara Media published an article that a friend of mine, Sebastian Shehadi, did, where they actually researched all of the language used in British media over the past year, and things like, you know, Israelis are massacred, Palestinians die, all of, you know, how important language, and not only language but speech itself, right? Spoken word, how important it has become in the last year, and we have not seen it, I think, manipulated to quite the same extent as we have done over the past year. And there was another section. There was one.
The question was, did it work, or what was the?
What was the
intention?
intention?
What was the actual point of it?
Yeah, so no, absolutely. I think the line that we have there where she says, we don't believe in censorship, but shouldn't there be a moral obligation on the media? That is the point of Thatcher's broadcast ban. She thought that if she did that, it would basically disincentivize, but also put them under a moral obligation to not actually have Sinn Féin. And it was the broadcasters, and it was the likes of Dennis Murray and that actually decided that this was a loophole around things. So, you know, and coming back slightly to what other people have said about Section 31, absolutely, it's a very interesting story, but I am interested in how cinematic techniques and tools are used in censorship. I'm working with film, and the dubbing is much more cinematically compelling, right, than Section 31 could be if you want to argue. Although there is another film on Section 31, I think that is out and about and might be here in December, maybe I shouldn't speak, but yeah, Frank Sweeney has done a film that definitely I would recommend. And then the question up at the top about
It was really from the actor, on behalf of the Actors Union, who obviously lost an awful lot of money when the band was lifted. God bless them for actors, you know.
No, there was another last question. Would you like to have, could you summarize? Oh, government's entitled to ban. Yeah, we actually had that question the first time it was going. I think that's a really good point. Like, you know, I think media doesn't control the narrative the way it did in the 80s and stuff, right? Like, you don't have legacy media, broadcast media that exists in that way. Obviously now it's a completely different thing. And so, you know, the only thing that I can think of as comparable would be something like banning people from Twitter, removing Trump from Twitter, reintroducing Trump. And no, I don't believe that we should be banning people. I don't think that is effective. I mean, that's a personal opinion, but I absolutely don't believe that. I think even with the riots, the race riots that were happening in Britain over the summer and stuff, people were talking about Tommy Robinson having to be removed from Twitter because he was allowed to basically tweet up a riot, several riots, and then go off to, where did he go, Cyprus or something, and then was removed from it, and that he should be prescribed and that he should be banned from Twitter, and absolutely not. I think the only way you can, you know, defeat that is through debate and argument. That's my opinion.
Thanks, Roisin. Danny?
Well, regarding my Armalite and ballot box speech, I do regret that I didn't take out copyright because I'd be very well. I mean, that description at the time came out of the election of Bobby Sands and Fermanagh South Tyrone, which was a remarkable election, which I personally date the beginning of the peace process in many respects. Because from the electoral rise of Sinn Féin, we forced the position of the British government had to talk to us and had to do a deal. So it was very, very important. In terms of do governments have the right to ban, they have a whole raft of laws for dealing with incitement to violence, to dealing with hatred. But all you need to do is just go back and read what the Brits themselves were saying. Brigadier Frank Kitson, in his book Low Intensity Operations, talked 50 years ago about the need to control the media, control the narrative, and if it meant recruiting the media into that strategy, to do it. So that's actually, we know exactly what they're doing. So the language that they're using today with regards to Gaza and Israel is exactly the same lexicon that they used here. No, the IRA murder, the British Army killed. I remember whenever the NIO decided suddenly to call the IRA Godfathers of Violence, within a week the media was just echoing that word. They couldn't make up their own mind. They just lifted the government words. When they changed the name of Long Kesh, the Maze prison, the media went along with it. So there's a compliant media there, and then there's a whole lot of decent journalists that stuck out their neck. The journalists who made Death on the Rock about the killing, the British Army's story about what happened in Gibraltar was completely false. Those journalists were suspended for 6 months for doing that. So there's journalists who have paid the price. There was a journalist, Peter Fern of the Press Association, and because he published a secret British Army document which made by Brigadier James Glover, he published this in 1979, and it said that the IRA cannot be beaten. The IRA is a political organisation. There has to be a political settlement. Their prisoners aren't criminals. This was sitting on Thatcher's desk when she took office, and he published that. And he was driven out of that job by the Press Association and had to go to America in 1979. So there are really good journalists. There are journalists who have lost their lives, journalists who have been put out of their houses, journalists who have been intimidated, who have lost work, who have lost money, all because they had a conscience. They're few and far between, but at least I'm sitting on this platform with one of them.
Great intro from Danny and from our Kenny Rogers lookalike. Actually, very prescient actually today because Barry and myself are back in the British court this week, and it just gives you another example of how things have moved from the very brutal ban back in 1988. And the story somehow starts in some of the footage that Roisin showed in her film. When Michael Stone went into Milltown Cemetery, the grenades that he threw were grenades that had been shipped in to the north from South Africa that arrived in the previous December, January. The dates are kind of blurry of when exactly that South African shipment arrived and fell into the hands of the loyalist paramilitaries, and he threw that grenade, and that was the first one from a very lethal batch. In 1994, 6 years later, a gunman walked into the Heights Bar in Locken Island with a VZ-58 that was from the same shipment and shot 6 men dead as they watched the Ireland-Italy match at the World Cup in 1994. And we made a documentary about that massacre called No Stone Unturned. The year after the film premiered, Barry and I were arrested at our homes on the 31st of August 2018. Now we took a judicial review and won that judicial review, but we subsequently then made a complaint to a very secretive court in London called the Investigatory Powers Tribunal, and this is a court that holds the spooks to account essentially. And what we thought was that myself and Barry may have been under surveillance, electronic surveillance in the lead up to our arrest. But what we've discovered is that the police in the north, the PSNI, have had an industrial scale operation in place against journalists going back many, many years, lifting their phone data, absolutely fixated on finding the sources of stories. And this week our complaint will come to a hearing at the IPT, and let's just put it into context. The IPT was the court that allowed MI5 to conduct extrajudicial killings around the world, so we know exactly what we're up against in this court. But just within the last week we've received a statement from an MP from Durham, from which the police force that was leading the investigation against us came from. The PSNI called in Durham, and that senior police, that MP Graham Morrison, gave a statement to us this week which said in the aftermath of our arrest, when he met us at the behest of the NUJ, his office received a phone call from the senior investigating officer who said that he needed to be educated about the North and that he shouldn't have met us because we were terrorists and thieves. Now, that's an indication of the mindset. I don't believe that's an indication of the mindset of a Durham police officer. I do believe that's the indication of the certain mindset within the PSNI today towards journalism and towards those who are prepared to challenge the dominant narrative. So I ask you to keep an eye on this case, because I think it will have ramifications not only in the north, but I do think there are journalists here in Dublin who are also very alert to what actually may have been happening here over the last number of years in terms of electronically surveilling them. We do believe that we will win. We've got a very good legal team led by John Finucane MP and Niall Murphy in the north, yeah, I think that things have changed from the very blunt instrument of 1988, but what really has changed?
Can I just say something? You mentioned Michael Stone attacking the mourners at the funerals of the Gibraltar Green, and you mentioned South Africa, but that was not just, they were not just a South African consignment. When Israel invaded Beirut in 1982 and drove out the PLO had to leave its weapons behind, which Israel seized. Though it was PLO weapons supplied by Israel and the apartheid regime in South Africa, which were used against us in Milltown Cemetery, which were used in the rocket attack. So, you know, the connections are international.
Yeah.
And so must be our solidarity.
Thank you very much.
They're also trying to censor kneecap at the moment.
Sorry, say that again?
They're also trying to censor kneecap.
No, they're not going to censor kneecap, no. Yeah, they tried to censor kneecap. Yeah, they did try. Yes.
All those drugs and curses.
Listen, the final word to you, Roisin. What really is the experience like being making this film, and where does it go from here?
Oh my gosh. I mean, it was a wonderful experience making this film. I think for me, it was also, I kind of was determined to understand the North, and this was a way for me to do it. It was also to understand why I also had a sense, you know, my father's from Derry, my mum's from Dublin, and I lived in Dublin. I had a sense of a lack of solidarity from, you know, the south towards the north, and I always wanted to understand why, and this did help me understand to a certain degree. What next? I hope I get more money for the next film. That's my main thing.
The film's going to be seen at other festivals now as well?
Yes, so the film is going to be around. It's going to be in Bertha Dock House. It also it's going to be. I'm not supposed to say that, but I have now.
Oh, sorry, I said that. That's the wonderful festival in Amsterdam. So this story is going to go out worldwide now.
Yeah, it is.
Great.
And it'll be broadcast in March also.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Where on?
I can't say yes.
All right. Okay. So you're censoring that information. Well, listen, thank you very much for coming today. It's been wonderful to spend so much time with you and so many of you come out. Please do vote. Yeah, please do.